Hello, good day, guys. For today, for today's lesson, I'll be discussing network troubleshooting. So these are just basic guides on network troubleshooting. So what are the things you have to consider when you are troubleshooting networks? So remember that part of our job as our network administrator is to make sure that the network runs 100% smoothly. While network runs, or from time to time, we will be encountering different problems in the network. The larger the network is, the more problems that we may encounter on the network, and the more difficult it is to troubleshoot networks. So this is just a simple guide on how what are the things to consider on troubleshooting network. Okay, so that I'll be starting with my presentation for today. Okay, guys, so this is network troubleshooting. This is all about guides on network troubleshooting. Okay, so the first thing is Ethernet troubleshooting, since we are dealing with Ethernet. So these are some of the guides on how you troubleshoot your computers, or some of the steps on doing troubleshooting on over the network. Okay, so always remember that basically when you work on an information technology organization, so basically the problem will be raised upon by an end user. So always remember, especially for those who will be working as an IT help desk, or the one who receive calls for asking for from end users asking for technical support. So always make sure to ask what the details of the support they need. Okay, and always remember that when we say that there's no network, there's a lot of questions that should have to consider. So what does network does not work means? So, ibig sabihin nun, you have to consider kung ano ba talaga yung wala na hindi nila ma-access over the network. What do you mean by what is the specific service that an end user cannot get from the network facility or resource? So as an IT help desk, you have to consider asking them on what is the specific service which is inaccessible over the network. So it may be a possible internet problem. So the internet may be down, or ano ba, internet lang ba, or other things. Okay, it may be a server down, or the application that they are using does not run pero may internet naman. Okay, you have to consider those two. So iba yung may internet, then the application is not running. It may be an application problem, or it may be the application is running but there's no internet on their computers. So those are two different things. So you have to consider the statement network does not work. Okay, so next is identify also if only a single computer is encountering problem, or a group of computers. Kasi possible that on a group of computers, the problem is on their internal network, or on their separate network. Kasi sometimes on deployment, so sometimes because you are extending network, sometimes you are installing mga mini switches, or yung mga 8-port switches, yung mga maliliit na switches lang. So sometimes you are dividing those networks into multiple segments or smaller segments. So sometimes problems occurs on those segments. So always have to consider asking also the end user if only his or her computer does not work, or does not have access to the network, or or all of those computers maybe on his office, or in his office or in his group can access the network. So you have to consider that one. Next is it may be a wing of building, or a building down. So ito ba yung portion ng building na walang connection, or the whole building, lahat yung buong building ba wala? So you may be considering troubleshooting the backbone. Baka mamaya wala ka ng backbone connectivity. So from your main building to the other building, so you have to consider those connectivities. Okay. So next is understand the path data takes through the network. So always consider, as a network administrator, you are the one configuring the network. You are the one designing how your cables connect with one another, designing how the switches connects with one another. So you have to make sure that you know the flow of the network. So you have to know the flow of the network. So kung gaano man ka-complex yung network, so as a network administrator, it is your responsibility to remember those configurations, those connectivities, those wires, kung saan ba siya dumaan. And always remember, that's one part of the job of a network administrator, is to have a good memory of all of those things. Kasi it's very difficult, especially for a complex network na there's so much configurations, there's so many devices, there's so many connectivities already. So it's very difficult to remember. So if you're having trouble remembering those, so always remember to document everything. Okay, para at least you have an idea which switch connects to another switch. Para for troubleshooting purposes, you understand uh, how uh, how how the network affects the computers on the organization. So always remember that to understand the path data takes through the network. So if you don't have if you are having problem memorizing all of those configurations and connectivities, always make sure to document. Okay, next is what does work and specifically what does not. Always consider identifying which are devices which still works and which does not. Okay, so dun papasok na isolation. You have to know how to isolate things which does not work on the network or which creates problem to the network. Okay, so always remember what does work and what does not on the network. So isolate those who does not work on the network. So that's one part of fault management in network management in network management is to isolate faults or problems. Okay, so the common problems is everything slow or not working. So lahat hindi na gumagana. Okay? So there may be problem with the core switch or the main switch. So you have to consider there are several things you have to consider. Maybe the server is not working or the firewall is not working and there's no internet already. There's technically no internet connection. So next is internet slow or server access is normal. So mabagal ang internet pero yung access mo naman sa system is ayos naman. So okay naman. So it's working properly. So we have to consider those network problem categories. Server access slow or not working, internet access seems normal. So may problem ka on the applications accessing the server and but yung internet mo naman is okay. Okay, so those are two different things again. So the internet and server access. Okay, number 4, single room, room of computers, area of building is low or not working. So always consider the size of the affected area. So it may be a single computer. So isolate the single computer. So it may be a room of computers. It may be an office or a building or the entire building. Okay, so have to consider identifying the scope of the problem. Okay, as you can see, this is some basic connectivity. You have here the okay. You have your internet. You have here your internet connections and okay, you have your internet connection here. So basically, this is connected to your MDF. So in MDF ay tinatawag nating main data frame. Okay, so main data frame is your main distribution. So usually ito yung mga data centers. So this is your main, if it may be located on the main office building. Or main list data or distribution frame. frame. So this is your main data frame or main distribution frame. So there are several devices on your MDF. You have this router, servers. So you have your internet connection here. So computers connected to the main data frame. So we have also what we call as the IDF or the intermediate data frame. Data or distribution frame. So basically, these are located maybe on the other building. So ito naman yung distribution on the building, and these are the switches. There are computers connected to the switches, and these are the segments on this particular. For example, this is building B. This is building A. Okay, so this is your backbone. This connects the MDF and the IDF. Okay, so you extend the networks using mini switches, yung mga 8-port switches, yung mga maliliit na desktop switches. So connect computers on it. Okay, so you have to consider what is the scope of the problem in the network. So pwede bang isang computer lang, pwedeng buong segment, buong building, or buong IDF, or buong network itself. So you have to consider the scope of the affected area of a particular network problem. Okay, so in a problem na everything is slow or not working, so it may be a wiring or network problem. So it may have an Ethernet loops. So nasty to find messes up network. So ito yung tinatawag na Ethernet loops. So this is a very simple mistake on network, but it really gives an effect to the entire network. So always consider na itong problem na to is very crucial to the network because talagang even a single cable can affect the entire network. So ang tinatawag na Ethernet loop is itong cable na to is nakakonect pabalik sa switch. So kinabit mo tong jack na naman na to sa any port on the switch. So basically, the end-to-end of a single cable is being patched on a single switch. So that is what we call as an Ethernet loop. So ang nagiging cost dyan is magkakaroon ka ng intermittent connection. So when you ping computers, intermittent connection, so meaning to say, hindi siya consistent or hindi siya reliable yung connectivity niya. So mapapansin nyo may mga putol-putol siya. So if that will be the case, it may be a problem. Kapag nag-ping ka at may mga request timeout on in-betweens, so there may be one of the cause is an Ethernet loop. Okay, always remember that even a single cable affects the entire network. So you have to make sure that you don't have Ethernet loops on your network. Okay, so always remember to avoid Ethernet loops, count cables per computer. So syempre, if how many computers are connected to a particular switch, ganun din kadami yung patch cable mo. Okay, so always consider counting cables. So remove extra cables. So, and also do not leave extra cables, especially pag naka-deploy siya sa mga offices na meron silang access. So, sometimes kasi hindi natin maiiwasan na we install a desktop switch because we need to extend the network and wala na tayong choice para ma-extend that one instead na mag-run ka ng wire again. So, you have to put a switch to extend the network. So always remember, and that switch may be accessible to the end user. So minsan kasi naiiwanan nyo yung kable, yan nakalaylay siya. So sometimes the end user or the or employees on the office, akala nila kailangan nakasoksok yun. So the problem is it creates an Ethernet loop and that causes problem to the network. So always consider removing extra cables. Okay, ito siya. So this is your Ethernet loop. Okay, so but on modern switches, na-avoid naman siya. Just always remember that if you're going to buy switches, it should have the STP or the spanning tree protocol. Or the spanning tree protocol. Okay? So the STP protocol, ang ginagawa niya is if this is enabled on the switch sa mga switches, so basically it prevents effect ng cable loops. So I mean to say kung ito ay nakakabit sa switch na merong STP, it will prevent it from yung effect nito ay hindi mararamdaman over the network. So okay, so it prevents problems caused by Ethernet loop. So you have to consider buying switches which do have STP or the spanning tree protocol. Okay? So everything slow or not working, so it will be wiring network problem. So cable too long, so always consider that for a Cat5 cable, that's 100 meters. So kaya lang, as much as possible, do not deploy a 100-meter cable. So you have to consider lesser length instead of using the entire 100 meters. Okay, cable with electrical or fluorescent ballast. So always remember that the power cables produces electromagnetic interference over your cable. So always remember that do not deploy cables parallel to power cables. So hubs still there. So they or there are daisy chain sa hubs or naka-series yung hubs. So but nowadays naman wala na sigurong gumagamit ng hub because of the problem encountered in hub in terms of traffic and collision of data. So most probably networks nowadays are deployed using switches. Okay, so next is network is very busy, so it's slow. Solid activity lights on switches. So look at the lights on MDF or IDF switches. Unplug or replug one at a time to see if traffic turns to normal. Note the port and track it down. So always remember that sometimes network is too busy because of several reasons. Okay, so always in industry, kahit naman on your MDF, di ba yung sa MDF nyo, sa IDF nyo, nakasaksak yung mga switches. So, there are lights on the switches. So, usually, makikita mo that they are blinking if there are transmission. But, the behavior of the light, sometimes mapapansin mo na if there's problem with your network. Okay? Kasi iba na yung activity niya. It may be too fast for the usual blinking of lights or LED lights or display of the switches na parang it's unusual. So, hindi na siya yung usual na blinking of lights or activity lights on switches na nakikita mo. So, there may be problem with your network. So, there are several problems or several factors that affects why network become so slow. Okay? So, the first one is the cause. First cause is maybe as worm or viruses or spyware or DDoS or the distributed denial of service. Okay, we have also the loop or the network loop or the chattery network card or bad drivers or bad card or yung driver na mismo or software na network interface card or the network interface card alone. Actually, but it's very, siguro, maybe, may na-encounter din kami na a very bad network card in terms of hardware, talagang defective siya, causes problem to the entire network. So we have to isolate that computer because when the computer is plugged into the network, yung isang computer na yung causes problem to the network. So we have to replace the network interface card to resume the operation of the computer. At the same time, wala na siyang effect on the network. So even a network card can have an effect on computers, on the network. Okay, next is keep OS updates and antivirus software up to date. So always update your operating system and antivirus. So always remember that antiviruses needs to be updated from time to time. whether it's automatic or scheduled, or you can manually update antivirus. Same also with the operating systems, because viruses also evolves, and also vulnerabilities of operating systems also evolves. So you have to consider updating your antivirus and operating system. Okay, so next is internet is slow or not working. So it can be a router problem. So you can turn on or turn back on the router. So that's a usual troubleshooting. Yes, yes. Even di ba lagi when you call sa call center ng mga telecom companies, when you have problems with your internet, their basic uh that's their basic thing that be asked, na itatanong sa inyo kung can you turn on or off your router, because sometimes routers are based on experience. There are times that encounters problems, and the network traffic stacks on the router. So there are instances that you have to reset the router to resume the operation again. So there are some, pero that's parang medyo madalang naman yon. So it can be a router problem. So the first thing that you have to do is turn off and turn back on the router. Next can be an upstream problem. So upstream, so basically, there's no data na nakukuha on your internet. So you can ping around. So always remember to ping. So it may be, so to check if there's connectivity, if there's a request timeout, so always consider the ping, or the latency of the ping is too high. So meaning to say, masyado mabagal yung data travel nyo or data transmission nyo. So you have to consider using the ping command. Overloaded WAN lines can be warm. So overloaded WAN lines or the internet lines. So baka mamaya marami kang request. So it can be a worm or email viruses eating up bandwidth, or a DDoS which eats up your bandwidth. So you have to consider deploying antivirus, network firewall. So kasi even though if you have a very huge internet or bandwidth, so it may be consumed by a worm or any viruses that affects your network. Okay, so can be a peer-to-peer file sharing program on a computer. So basically, it may be a sharing program. So if you're familiar with the mga torrent applications, so basically it consumes a lot of bandwidth because it's a continuous upload and download connectivities. So you have to consider blocking if this is on an organization or a company, or on an office, and you consider office productivity and resource productivity. So you have to consider disabling or blocking their torrent programs or peer-to-peer file sharing programs. Okay, streaming video or audio congesting the network, same also. So video consumes also a lot of bandwidth. So imagine if all of the computers on your organization will be streaming videos, so you'll be needing a larger a larger bandwidth. Okay, so you have to consider that video streaming consumes a lot of bandwidth. So baka mamaya lahat nag-YouTube na. So basically, most probably it also eats up to the entire bandwidth of your organization. Group of computers though are not working. What do they have in common? So all connected to same hub. Are those computers connected to the same hub? So get a switch. Or maybe the problem is the switch itself. Okay? If that is a switch and still all of those computers are having problems, so you have to connect it to, or you have to change the switch. Maybe the switch is defective. Okay? Sometimes devices became defective over time. So you have to make sure that sometimes to check if the switch is still working properly. Okay? Kasi mapapansin nyo naman yan eh. Yung source mo from the switch, i-connect mo direkta sa iyong PC to check if the network is good. Okay? Tsaka nyo na lang ibalik yung source papunta dun sa switch and connect the computers again. Okay? So if the problem is the device, replace it. All connected to the same mini switch. So same also if that is connected to smaller switches. So power cycle the switch. So the first thing that you can do is to power cycle, to turn on and off turn off and turn it on again. So sometimes you can resolve the problem by doing that. But if that is if that does not resolve the problem, so you have to consider some other factors affecting problems to the network. Okay, next is check for loops. So check for Ethernet loops, replace switch, change port on IDF or MDF. Baka mamaya yung port nyo on the IDF, let's say sa mga patch panel nyo, is medyo may problema na. So, try changing it on a different port. Or sometimes naman, yung sa port sa switch, may problema. Sometimes it happens also that a single port on the switch does have problem on it. So, you have to move it to another port. Okay, so what do they have in common also? So, are all computers have the same model or from same image? Ano ba yun? Do they have the same operating systems, same software, same configuration? So, we have to consider that if the image do have virus, baka mamaya yung image na pinanggilingan ay may virus na. So, basically, most probably all of the computers do have viruses. Next is client software installed or configured wrong. So basically, the network configuration is wrong or the system configuration is wrong on computers. So next is OS not patch. So basically, sometimes problems occurs when operating systems are not patched or updated, or a bad network interface card driver or a software of the network interface card. Okay, so there may be a problem with the same wing or area. So power cycle switches in IDF or MDF. Some of this takes over 3 minutes to boot. So don't just go and do this without warning users. Okay, so if that is if you're going to reset switches on the IDF, okay, if you're going to reset switches on the IDF, for example, kasi possible nagkakaproblema ko on this building, on building B. So, ang gagawin mo is to power cycle this one, turn on and off the switches here. So, ang mangyayari is mawala ng connectivity lahat ng dandito. Always remember that when you are resetting, it's a practice that you have to inform the end user that you will be resetting devices para at least they know kung mawawalan sila ng connection o wala. Kasi sometimes, hindi lang naman yung nag-report ang may problema. There may be some computers on the network which still works, which is also connected to the same IDF or MDF. Kaya na pag nireboot mo siya, mas damay siya. So always remember to warn the user that you are rebooting devices on your IDF or MDF, or you are going to reboot switches. Okay, so single computers though are not working, so restart the computer, unplug or replug or replace cables, check its connection at MDF or IDF. So check nyo yung connection. Baka mamaya may problema na yung port dito, so you can replace it and patch it on another port. Okay. Okay, change its port at MDF and IDF. Don't move other wires. So as much as possible, if itong mga wires na to has nothing to do with what you are troubleshooting, do not move those wires. Don't clean up wiring if that is not your purpose of or purpose while you are on the IDF or MDF. Kasi kahit yung sa mga IDF namin, so usually sobrang gugulo na because usually kalilipat ng port. So, nagtitwist na yung mga wires, nagtatanggal na yung mga wires. So, basically, hinaya na muna namin ganyan kasi it's very difficult to move all those wires para mamaya wala ng connection. So, you have to make sure that you schedule the proper maintenance of those cables para at least nakafocus ka that you are dealing with organizing the cables. Okay? So, if your purpose is just to troubleshoot muna, so just isolate the single wire and do not move around different wires, so or do not unpatch or disconnect other wires for the purpose of troubleshooting the problem. Okay, So always make sure to limit the movement on the MDF or IDF because there are so many computers which are connected to the IDF or the MDF. Okay? So if it doesn't fix it, change it back. Okay? So kung if you isolate the problem and still the problem is still there, so you can always bring back the connections or the configuration. Okay, so patches or antivirus or spyware. So install patches or antivirus. Upgrade or install network interface drivers or cards. Or replace network interface card. Baka mamaya sira na yung network interface card niya. You can test network interface card. For speed duplex, gigabit switch Cat5 wiring. So for speed duplex, so basically, pwede nyo palitan yung speed and duplex on the network interface card. Sometimes kasi may mga network interface card, di ba, 100 Mbps. So sometimes nasisira siya, it only operates on a 10 Mbps but still works. Okay? So sometimes you can change the speed and duplex. Just go to the IP version 4. So before the IP prop that is from that yung pagte-change ng IP, so makikita niyo meron dong configure. So makikita niyo yung speed and duplex there and then change it to 10 Mbps. Siguro at the end of the presentation, I'll be doing a video of the of how to change the duplex of the PC of a computer. Okay, so a network may not work because of any of the below reasons. So most of this already discussed. Network card not properly connected, bad network card drivers or software settings, firewall preventing computers from seeing each other because if you are sharing if you are sharing files or printers over the network or other resources over the network, so maybe the firewall is configured to prevent computers from seeing each other or for communicating with each other. So you can disable firewall first for you to be able to check if the firewall is preventing computers from connecting with one another. Okay, next is connection related issues. Basically, it may be the internet connections or cables or wires or bad network hardware. So, a network hardware, yung pinaka network interface card na talaga may problem. Okay, so first make sure that the connection to the network is tight. So, lahat naman yun, as a general rule, even your crimping, dapat maayos siya. Yung pag-crimp nyo ng RJ45, it should be tight. Okay, para kahit paano the contact is very intact. Next is check to make sure light next to the network card is blinking. So, meron naman mga indicator, whether it's a network interface card or switches, there's a light indicator for network activity. Verify connections and LEDs. Okay. Check network adapter resources. Kung makikita nyo, you can check the network adapter resources. Baka on the network adapter makikita nyo yung kano kadaming bytes yung nako-consume ng particular network adapter or resource. Check firewall settings to check kung ano ba yung mga naka-block on the firewall, or you can turn off the firewall first. Next is wait for additional time for computers to detect and see network. So sometimes configurations does not apply immediately. So basically you have to wait for a particular time to detect if the computer or device will connect to the network. Especially for some devices like managed switch na kino-configure, basically sometimes yung configuration takes time para mag-apply. Okay, next is uninstall driver of network interface card and try to reinstall it again. Okay, you can uninstall the driver of the network interface card and reinstall it again. Okay, so for the last topic, that will be network troubleshooting best practices. To make troubleshooting as efficient and painless as possible, it's also important to have some best practices in place as you work through the steps to try to solve network issues. Following these network troubleshooting best practices can help streamline the process and avoid unnecessary or redundant efforts. Okay? So basically, ito daw yung network troubleshooting best practices. So para ito yung i-perform nyo when you are troubleshooting networks para mas maging efficient at mas maging mas mabilis ang paghahanap nyo ng problem over the network and to solve the problem. Okay, so para hindi na rin masayang yung mga efforts natin on troubleshooting, because sometimes troubleshooting network is a very difficult task, especially for a very large network. Ang hirap maghanap ng mga problem. So you have to consider the following. The first is collect information. Next is customize logs. Next is check access and security. Next is use monitoring for follow and escalation framework. Next is use monitoring tools. Okay, the first one is collect information. To best support your end users, you first need to make sure you're clear on what's the problem is. Collect enough information from both the people who are experiencing network issues and the network itself so you can replicate or diagnose the problem. Take care not to mistake symptoms for the root cause, as what initially looks like the problem could be a part of a larger issue. So always to consider proper collection of information, especially from end users. So what is supposedly the problem? You have to identify. So always remember from the previous discussion that it's different to have problems with the internet and to have problems with access to the server. That's two different things. So you may have an internet but you don't have a system. You may have a system but you don't have an internet. So always always to collect information properly. So as much as possible, ask the end user what is the specific problem. What is the specific problem for you to be able to draw what is the best solution for their problem. Sometimes kaya may mga help desk is for the help desk to assist the users if the problem can be resolved by troubleshooting online. So sometimes yun yung first one of the job description of an IT help desk is for him or her to assist the end user if that is possible na ma-resolve yung problem over a telephone. Okay, so that is the first step, is to collect the information, and always remember to collect the information to the end users with a very specific description of what is his or her problem with his computer or her computer. Okay, so that's the first step, which is collect information. The second step is customize logs. Make sure your event and security logs are customized to provide you with information to support your troubleshooting efforts. Each log should have a clear description of which item or events are being logged, the date and the time, and information to the source of the log. Always make sure when you are dealing with troubleshooting, you have to make logs para at least you have an idea na ito pala ay lagi nasisira, ito yung pala yung history of the problem of this computer. So basically, you have to have documentations. Even on an IT help desk, meron siyang documentation na yung mga pag tumawag, i-document niya kung ano yung mga problem na na-encounter ng end users before the technical support is being deployed over sa end user. So para ma-resolve yung problem niya. So you have to make sure that you customize logs or take logs. Okay, that is very important para at least you have an idea na ito pala ay nasira ng gantong oras, ito pala yung problem ng PC na to. So what will be the solution for paano na-solve tong problem na to? So you have to consider different documentations para at least you have an idea what's happening to your operations and to your network. Next is check access and security. Ensure no access or security issues have come up by checking all access permissions are all as they should be, and nobody has accidentally altered a sensitive part of the network they weren't supposed to be able to touch. Check all firewalls, antivirus software, and malware software to ensure they're working correctly and no security issues are affecting your users' ability to work. So always remember to grant users with his or her permitted access only. So hindi pa pwedeng lahat is kaya niyang i-access over the network. So you as a network administrator may have a capability of doing anything on the network, but always remember that end users do have limitations on what to access over the network. Okay? So aside from checking the access of end users, so you have to consider yung mga antivirus, softwares, malwares, and firewalls, because that is very important on the network. You know, having a very complex network or large network will give you an increased risk on security. Okay? So the bigger the network is, the bigger the security issues it may have. Okay, so you have to consider different softwares and appliances or hardware na kailangan nyo ilagay over the network to protect it from uh, security issues. Okay, so that's number 3, check access and security. Next is follow an escalation framework. Okay, so etong escalation framework is define which which section in your organization, especially for information technology, will respond to a particular problem. You have to know how to address the problem and where to address the problem. Okay? Kasi nagiging problem, hindi pa pwede, ang naging problema is when an end user reports to a particular IT help desk for a particular problem, hindi alam nung sometimes hindi alam kung kanino mo ibabato yung problema. So you have to consider there are there are different job functions in the IT, and different concerns should be addressed or should be forwarded the to a particular section which have expertise on that particular matter. Okay? Hindi pa pwedeng ituturo ka kung kani-kanino. Okay? So, pare, ikaw si end user, tumawag ka. I have a problem with my system. I cannot access a particular module. Tinuro mo kay technical support, tinuro mo kay printer repair, tinuro mo kay network admin. Yung pala kay programmer yon. So, you have to identify kung kanino mo ba siya, kung kanino mo ba ibibigay yung problem na yan para ma-resolve. Okay? It is what we call as setting up clear escalation ng problema. Okay? So, we are setting a clear escalation of a particular problem. Kung kanino mo ba i-forward yung concern, para that concern will be evaluated and resolved by the person who has an expertise on that particular matter or problem. Okay? So, alamin nyo kung kanino mo siya talaga i-forward. Okay? The problem should be forwarded to a specific person na may expertise on doing that. Okay? Or solving that. So, that's the 4th one, follow an escalation framework. And the last one is use monitoring tools. Troubleshooting can be done manually but can become time-consuming if you go through each step. When you have a bunch of people knocking on your office door or sending you frantic emails, it can be overwhelming to try to find the problem, let alone fix it. In business and enterprise situation, it's best to use monitoring tools to make sure you're getting all the relevant network information and are missing anything vital, not to mention avoid exposing the company to unnecessary risk. So always remember there are several monitoring tools na ginagamit over the network para at least you have an idea how do your devices works on the network. So how do your network functions? Yung mga monitoring tools can also monitor if there's a problem with your network device. If the network device fails, so automatically monitor nyo. Aside also from that, the monitoring tool will help you identify how your network facility operates. So basically, how you monitor kung gaano ba ang resources na ginagamit na over the network. Let's say, for example, for internet connection, how much bandwidth is being consumed by 500 computers which are connected to the network. So you can only do that by a monitoring tool. Okay, there are several monitoring tools which is very important to monitor problems at the same time to monitor performance of devices. Okay? So, there are several monitoring tools, kaya lang, yung iba, you have to pay for a particular license for a particular monitoring tool, but there are free tools for monitoring, like for your mga computers, meron tayong tinatawag na event viewer para at least you monitor what's happening on the servers or computers. Okay? So, just like with your laboratory last time, so this is just a recap of the troubleshooting commands. So, we have the ping or the packet internet grouper, or the ping or the simplest TCP/IP diagnostic tool. So, basically, it tests connectivity if there's a ping or a reply. So, basically, you have connections. And if that's a request timeout, meaning to say, may problem with your connection. So, we have the IP config /all, spike release, renew, trace route, hostname, ipconfig, ping, traceroute, path ping, netstat, getmac, arp, ns lookup. Okay, I think I already performed all of those troubleshooting commands, network commands. Okay, so that will be all for today's discussion. So followed by this discussion, kindly answer the assessment task. Okay, for tomorrow, I hope that you have your crimping tool. So I'll be doing a live discussion tomorrow. So I'll be explaining the crimping tool for. I'll be explaining the how to crimp RG45. Hopefully, all of you do have a crimping tool because that will also be your midterm exam. I'll be posting your midterm exam details next week, or maybe tomorrow, or maybe next week. Okay, so just hopefully just prepare your crimping tool for tomorrow, and also I'll be posting the Google Meet link for our live discussion. Okay, so good day, guys. So that will be all for Unit 7 Network Troubleshooting topic.